Good morning, everybody, to this session, and welcome to this session on the road to energy independence and how we, as the social and cooperative and public housing sector, can contribute to it and can contribute to the action plan, the joint action plan to RepowerEU. And there will be some communication about this action plan tomorrow, so we think it's almost perfect timing to discuss this today. And we have in our sector, as well as in many other sectors, a lot of challenges right now. We have the same ambition to have a green and have a social fair energy transition, but we also now look into more challenges than before. And when we look at the cost of living here, you can see on the slides, what we had not expected just a year ago, now we see a high rates of inflation all over the European countries. And when we look at the inflation at the EU average, and when we look at the contribution from energy, more than a third of the rise in the inflation comes from energy prices. So this level of inflation, maybe it will be a little less next year, we can hope so, but we haven't expected that just a couple of years ago. And when we look at just a year ago, and when we look at the next slides, we can see a common challenge we have in all of the European countries, that the construction materials, we have a high increase in the price levels of construction materials, a high degree of inflation. And in many of the European countries, we have caps over the prices, how much social and cooperative housing can cost. So it is a huge, huge challenge. In my own country, Denmark, we have this cap, and we have almost stopped to have new buildings right now. The production of new buildings has almost stopped because of the high rise of the prices of construction materials, and it's way beyond the caps that we have in the Danish context. And when we look at renovation and what we do for more insulation, the prices has, of course, also soared a lot, and we also have deep and severe challenges there. So we have, as I said before, we have still the same ambition. And now we also have, because of the security situation too, that we have a more independent EU from imports of energy, especially from Russia. So we have to move faster than we expected before to reduce our use of energy. And now we have to do it more efficiently than before in order to do it, because of the high prices of construction materials. And now we not only have to reduce our use of energy, but we also have to have a transition in the use of energy. And that's why I'm very happy today that we have people from the industry, and we can look into heat pumps, we can look into how we use solar panels, and together with the industry, can make this transition, which is a very huge challenge. We're also looking into other things can we do when we install solar panels and heat pumps. How can we do that in energy communities? There has been a policy at the EU level to make local energy communities, which is a very good idea, but also has been a big challenge because of many other restrictions. And I hope too that we today will come into these restrictions, because local production of energy and the installation of new means to repower our sector is very urgent at the moment now, and more urgent than ever. So I'm so happy, and so welcome to you again. I'm so happy you are all here, and I look forward to the discussion that we will have today. So welcome, everybody. And I give the floor to you, Julian. You will be the moderator of today. And thank you for that.
Thank you very much, Bent, and thank you for setting the scene, actually, quite the challenging context in which social, cooperative, and public housing providers have to operate. And this is against this background that we're going to discuss today in two parts, basically. The first panel will be about the representative of the industry explaining the challenge and basically also what they can offer to social, cooperative, and public housing with the view of decarbonization by 2050. And the second panel will be about the experience and the need from social, cooperative, and public housing providers. And we'll finish the morning with the concluding remarks by Carlis Goldstein, member of the cabinet of Commissioner Kadri Simpson, EU Commissioner for Energy, and Soko Edwards, Secretary General of Housing Europe. Indeed, I'm glad that we have a really distinguished list of speakers today. And so for the first panel, I'd like just to remind you of the basic practical issue and practical points. After the first panel, there will be a time for Q&A. So you will have the opportunity either to raise, these little yellow hands that we now all know from Zoom and ask directly your questions, or to put it on the chat. I see already that people are using the chat. It's very well. Please, in both cases, keep your questions very short, so that we can really leave everyone the time to make a proper input. And that will be the same for the second panel. So we leave basically the panelists go through the presentations, and after it, we'll have a Q&A session where you will be able to ask your questions either directly or in the chat. So yes, without further delay, we will go straight to the first panel. So I'm happy to have Naomi Chevillard, Head of Regulatory Affairs and Solar Power Europe, Thomas Novak, the Secretary General of the European Heat Pump Association. Hi, Thomas. Hi, Naomi. And Sven van Elst, the Director of Operations from Aster. So not strictly speaking, representative of an industry, but rather, Sven will explain to us about the point of view of Aster and how really they managed to combine different technological solutions on the social housing or in the social housing sector. So I will give the floor to you, Naomi, for your first round of input. So I'm glad that you managed to be with us today. And well, please, the floor is yours. If you have any slides, by the way, that you can share with us directly from your computer. Thank you very much.
Thanks for the introduction and for the invitation. I'm very happy to be with you today. I think it's very important that we discuss, especially today with the current energy crisis. No slides on my side, so I'll try to keep it short and dynamic so that you can see the graph, imagine the graph as you listen to me. Okay, so I come from Solar Power Europe, the solar PV industry. Just a word about our industry, where solar PV is booming in Europe. We've had last year a historical record of installation in Europe. We installed more than ever over a year in Europe, and we will break this record this year if everything goes well. And we think that the numbers are going to go exponentially. So just to give you an idea, we installed 26 gigawatts in 2021. We expect to install more or less 30 gigawatts in 2022, and if we take the right measures by 2025, we think we're able to install 100 gigawatts by 2025. That's of course if we solve a number of problems in the energy system, but we'll be at least at 50 gigawatts installed a year. And the reason for that is that solar is increasingly cost competitive with other energy technologies. So if you look at solar PV at tailpipes, we're cost competitive and cheaper than fossil fuels for a couple of years now. And if you look the prices of rooftop PV, they are cheaper than commercial and industrial electricity prices, but also in a number of countries, residential retail prices. So there is really a competitiveness. if we look also at solar and storage, what we see is also that solar and storage is also increasingly cost competitive with gas that is used with flexibility for flexibility purposes in the system. So so really we have a cost argument. The other reason is that solar PV is really scalable. You can install it on parking lots, you can install it on roofs, you can install it in different surfaces. So so a good technology to adapt to the different needs of consumers. So, but here today, I'm here to talk about solutions for social housing. So I wanted to tell you about technologies, economic models, and solutions to improve access. So starting with technologies, and it's interesting because in the introduction, you mentioned the cost of construction materials. So you probably know that solar PV, the solar PV, when we talk about solar PV, we talk about the solar panel that we install on roof, but we actually have a lot of innovation in integrated PV, precisely the building integrated PV. So it's technologies where it's about construction material, where the solar cell is integrated in the construction material, and the construction material can therefore produce electricity. So we're talking about solar glass, for example, solar tiles, or materials that you can put on walls. And it's a technology that allows to lower the cost of installing solar PV, because it bundles the price of a construction material and the solar PV technology. It's a technology that we expect will boom. The Commission will announce tomorrow a strategy to develop this integrated technologies in the solar strategy to be published next year, and it's important for us also to get the feedback of those who will use the technology to remove the barriers to this technology. So that's about technologies. Now I wanted to also tell you about models and ways in which you can use and access solar energy. I think we can talk about 4 models. The most obvious one is self-consumption, where you have solar PV installed on a building, and you save on the grid fees or the taxes on the electricity that is self-consumed. It's a model that has been recognized in the Renewable Energy Directive in 2018, and that is now being implemented in different member states. And that is increasingly interesting for consumers. A spin-off of that model, and that would be model 2, is collective self-consumption. So the idea of having several points of production that consume locally, and the production is shared between different consumers. So that would be appropriate, for example, to a multi-occupancy building, but we're also looking at models where the energy is shared on the public grid between different buildings, for example, that are part of a neighborhood. This is also a model that is developed in Spain, in France, in Switzerland, in the Netherlands, which are a bit pioneering. And we hope that that more action is taken in the next years to develop these models, to share the best practices, to share the challenges, so that we find the right solutions, to develop these models. A third model has been mentioned is the Renewable Energy Community. So it's a legal structure that allows citizens, public authorities, or SMEs to buy renewable energy. So, for example, develop a solar plant and benefit from the solar electricity, or develop jointly solar rooftops. It's an extremely interesting model that was established in the last clean energy package. But which has its limits, because it's also a model where which is fit for citizens, that must be controlled for citizens. And I think there are questions to explore with you on to which extent it has proven some limits for social housing. And the fourth model I wanted to tell you about is renewable PPAs. So renewable power purchase agreement, a PPA, is a contract, a long-term contract that a buyer, an energy consumer, has with an energy producer. It's a contract where you purchase electricity to a solar plant, for example, over 10, 15, 20 years, and you agree on a strike price for the sale of electricity. If the electricity price is higher then the strike price, the solar plant will get more revenue, so will compensate the building, for example, or the electricity consumer. If the electricity price is lower than the strike price, the contrary happens, and both gets stability on the electricity price that will be on the revenues for the solar plant and on the electricity price for the solar consumer. It's a very interesting model for buildings. It still has, it still faces obstacles. For the moment, we have PPAs with large electricity consumers, but in the RepowerEU package, there will be a guidance where the Commission has pledges, from what we heard, to look at how we can remove barriers to the access to renewable PPAs for example, a network of buildings. So a number of models which should develop in the future. Now, the question is how to make it more accessible to the industry. We have seen some industry initiatives. There is, for example, in France, the Sol Solidaire project that you might have heard of. It's an NGO that gets donations from solar companies and then installs solar PV on social housing buildings. And they installed in 2020 100 social housing buildings with solar PV, and they're continuing the project in 2022. But we need more. We need to make sure that social housing has access to third-party financing. So a model where an investor installs a solar PV for a building and rents you the use of the solar PV for a couple of years before the ownership goes back to the social housing. We need support to social housing, and here the regions in particular are quite committed to facilitate access to solar PV by providing, for example, grants. But here we're thinking state aid procedures could be a limit, and it's important for us that the European Commission makes sure that local regions or states that want to help social housing buildings or these kind of players access solar PV do not have these uncertainties in providing these supports. And yeah, last but not least, we think it's important to make sure that as we renovate or the building stock, or as we build new buildings, we also make it more automatic and more easy for the construction industry to install solar PV. So we're asking for, we're exploring the idea of solar mandates on new and renovated buildings as soon as 2025. So a couple of ideas, and I hope we can discuss them in that panel.
Thank you very much, Naomi. It's a lot already, and so if you have questions, Naomi, please keep them for just after at the end of the panel. You basically answer one of the questions I wanted to ask to you and Thomas, which is what is your expectation of the RepowerEU plan that will be published tomorrow? And I mean, you answer already by saying that there will be initiatives around removing barriers to promote some of those models that you mentioned, like the PPA. Obviously, the last point you made is particularly interesting for us, because each time we hear about mandates or obligation to install, solar panels on buildings, I mean, this is something that really we want to look and listen carefully. So do you mean that there will be something like this tomorrow in the plan? Just in a quick answer. Yes.
So indeed, the RepowerEU package is a big package of 15 files. Out of it, there will be a solar energy strategy, which contains a solar PV initiative. And in this initiative, indeed, there are some ideas to have solar mandates on public buildings, but also on private buildings. There are also a number of initiatives to make sure that we develop the economic models that I just mentioned, so that it's also economically attractive and technically easy for building owners to enter into solar PV self-consumption, energy communities, or PPAs. But yeah, there is this reflection on mandates. It's not going to be it's not going to be a legal proposal yet, but it could influence the negotiation at the moment on the energy performance of buildings. And again, we're building the ideas on models that work. For example, in France, where there is an obligation on to install solar PV on all new and renovated non-residential buildings. So we're exploring with a size limit of the buildings of 500 square meters. I think we can be a bit more ambitious, but we're really working on that. And of course, it has to be attached to financing support. Yeah.
Thank you, and I'm sure we'll come back to some of the points in the discussion. Now, I would like to give the floor to Thomas Novak, Secretary General of the European Heat Pump Association. Thomas, yeah, basically, same question is for Naomi. So, what is your, first of all, what is the thing that your industry can really provide to the social, cooperative, and public housing providers in the view of decarbonization, and what is your expectation of tomorrow's RepowerEU plan? So, thank you, and over to you.
Thank you, Julien, and thank you also for the opening remarks of your president, and thanks, Naomi, for the great segue. Well, what can we do? I think the vision that we have as heat pump industry is better buildings. It's not only replacing the existing heating system, but really replacing the heating system against a heating system that uses renewable energy, that integrates much better into the electric grid. So buildings become active nodes. Of course, that's not something that the end user necessarily cares for. But if you make a building heat pump ready, you automatically improve the indoor quality, the indoor environmental quality, and you also help to improve the outdoor quality because you avoid emissions at the point of operation. And if we arrive at these close to 100% renewable electricity, then it's actually going to be a clean heating and cooling system. Heat pumps can provide solutions today for residential buildings, for commercial buildings, and for an industry, also for district heating. I guess everybody has read the news. Heat pumps are a bit all the rage at the moment, since people realize out of a sudden that they are connected to Russian gas supplies, and that is actually not what they want, ethically speaking. Of course, they could have known that for years because the fundamentals of this market have not changed, but this war that Russia has waged on Ukraine is, of course, making everybody very well aware, and that creates a demand that was not anticipated. We had the Decarb Cities conference last week in Vienna, and one of the moderators asked me, so Thomas, can you tell us when we will have sufficient supplies of heat pumps again? And please, no lobby bullshit answer. So that was, but the answer is nobody has anticipated this. Of course, we have been talking about fast ramp up of capacity for a while, but it wasn't seen as necessary because until end of last year, it was actually quite a challenge to sell heat pumps because of the very low cost of the counterfactual. And I'm saying it like this because I'm hearing often that people say, when will heat pumps become cheaper? The true question that we should ask is, when are we going to pay for the proper cost of heating and cooling our buildings? When are we doing it in a way that we integrate also the external costs, the environmental damage that comes from the use of fossil energy? And when you do that, then heat pump technology is coming at the same cost level than oil and gas boilers. So actually, it's basically, that's what the costs are that we have. And luckily, we can also expect economies of scale and experience also on the installer level that most likely will bring the cost down. The market, for what it's worth, we have sold 2.1 million units in 2021, and we're expecting 2.5 million in 2022. That may be plus minus a few, because nobody knows how the delivery situation is currently rolling out. A lot of components is coming from China. Some of the heat pumps are coming from China or from Asia, and a lot of it is blocked in Shanghai at the moment. If you have read the news, the situation of lockdown in Shanghai is only released gradually starting these days. What can we expect from RepowerEU? Actually, I'm not expecting anything at the moment, because I've seen a draft document that was leaked, and that is actually moving back beyond the rather positive announcements that were put into the RepowerEU communication. And now we have nothing that is similar to what the solar industry is expecting. There is not a proper strategy. There is not even this heat pump accelerator that was mentioned before that we would really like to see. So I'm actually on the more disappointed side here. And we'll see what comes out tomorrow, because of course we have told the Commission that if these documents that we have seen are your final documents, then you're really not delivering on the necessary speed to decarbonize the building sector. Business models, I leave that. If you have special questions, I can talk about it. But what I wanted to show is a few examples. We have many big heat pumps that can serve either district heating, and then if social housing is connected to district heating, then you would benefit, the inhabitants would benefit. Good examples are in Gothenburg, in Stockholm, in Helsinki, in Paris, in Oslo, and Drammen. The most recent edition in the city of Esbjerg, 2 times 25 megawatts. So it's really also big Bs that provide employment, but also multifamily buildings. One manufacturer is running a project that's called Zerot. You have to imagine it as an ambient loop that goes from bottom to top and provides energy to individual heat pumps that are installed per each apartment. The footprint that you need for that is about 60 by 60 because it's a water tank and a small heat pump on top. Other projects run by the same idea in Vienna. I have visited personally last year a multifamily building, three high rises, 145 apartments, and they were renovated under occupancy, meaning really this ambient loop was installed and then apartment after apartment after apartment, 145 apartments were renovated. Inhabitants were super satisfied, really, that was something that they liked because they felt that the quality of heat was better, reliability was better. This was done by Together Housing in Blackburn. And also we have looked at Sozialbau in Vienna. They are very active in moving gas boilers out of apartments, replacing them with central hydraulic distribution systems, and they can be connected either to district heating or individual heat pumps per building. So there's a lot of examples that can be used and that should be used. And I hope that the economics will shift in the direction that it makes it also mandatory for social housing companies to start thinking, because I do not expect that the end users, the tenants in the social housing, will be the driving force. But this has to be done by legislation, including financial support, but it has to be done by the social housing companies, and the industry is ready to contribute to that.
Thank you very much, Thomas. Just one point, just to react, to say, yeah, the industry is ready. On the other hand, you mentioned some of the bottlenecks that currently are happening in the industry. Another point, which actually is also a question pretty more valid and more relevant for Naomi, is the question of the availability of the essential material for the transition. There was, as you know, a very recent study by the KU Leuven, which explained that basically decarbonization will require much more critical metals than what we have now in Europe, and so the increase which is needed is from 30% to 3,000%. So just Thomas, a question for you. So beyond the let's say short-term external factor like COVID and war, what is the expectation of your industry about the ability to deliver on the massive demand that we are seeing at the moment, and that actually is pushing by the European Commission as well?
Yeah, the shortages that we see are by and large applying to single and double family houses. They're not so much applying to the larger installations that you would find in multifamily buildings and district heating, because these are much more bespoke and the demand there hasn't increased in parallel. It is really the end user that owns their house that woke up on the 24th of February and said, wow, where is my gas coming from? Do I want to continue to fund Putin with my money? And many of them decided no, and they called their installers. And so installers now, where they had one request per week, maybe they have now 5 requests per day. So this is the big shortage that we see, not so much on the larger applications. With regards to materials, heat pumps do not use any rare earths or any of these, what I would call really critical materials. And there was an assessment by the European Commission, I think it was last year, where they looked at the different product categories and sectors, and then heat pumps came out as being safe from demands in that area. So we're not like batteries or anything. But of course, you're right. What KU Leuven showed was that there is a huge demand in steel, in aluminum, in copper. And yes, that is also something that we need. And what we see was really much more critical than that, because the prices have gone up for these substances, but there is supply in semiconductors, because we see that the more efficient you want these heat pumps to be, the more small controllers you need. One for the pump, one for the motor and the fan, one for the heat pump itself, and then a controller to integrate into the electric system, and maybe to offer also remote maintenance potential. So where you didn't have any of these complicated controllers in the past, you have 10 or something today. It's not the same as in cars, right? So we're not on the same level, but it is a limiting factor as we speak. So we have asked the European Commission, when they did their chip study last year, to also take into consideration that not everything is electric vehicles, tablets, and mobile phones, but there is also other products that require, and I think Naomi will say the same, inverters, for example, are heavily dependent on semiconductors. So there are other products that require this type of technology.
Thank you. Maybe Naomi, you want to react briefly to that?
Yeah. On our side too, a solar panel doesn't use the raw material that you have in mind, rare earths, lithium, etc. We use materials that are abundant on Earth, like silicon, like silver. But it doesn't mean that it's that we shouldn't deal with it, because the price of these raw materials can influence the end price of the module. The location of those raw materials can also influence, the whole solar PV value chain. So we've asked the Commission to have a more advanced strategy. I think the report from Eurometaux was very interesting, because it gave a lot more elements. One part of the strategy is to bring back the transformation of the raw materials in Europe. So not necessarily the extraction and mining, but at least the transformation, the production of a module. I think already 2.5 years ago, we launched an industrial alliance to redevelop module manufacturing in Europe. We have this objective of producing 20 gigawatts of module. Really the whole value chain up to the module, so also the cells in Europe by 2025. And we already have projects that are opening factories in Europe. And the other pillar of the strategy is a diversification strategy. So probably partnering with other countries that mine silicon, that mine silver, in order to ensure sustainable and affordable access to raw materials. Another point is, as you said, the impact on semiconductors, indeed for our inverters, especially for European ones, and we're working a lot on that. But other than that, today the raw materials availability impacts slightly the prices of modules. But I think it's really it's a rather big component of a large-scale project. It's a smaller component of a rooftop PV project. So for the moment, I wouldn't say this harms really the rooftop PV market. What does harm the rooftop PV market is the availability of skills and workforce. We have difficulties, having all the installers to install PV. So we're working on that, trying to mobilize also other industries, because this is really an area where we'll need more workers.
Thank you. Of course, the last point is crucial for a lot of things related to decarbonization and for renovation as well. You made a very good transition to Sven, because Sven will talk about a concrete, very practical example of an implementation of the solar power energy on the social housing building. So Sven, maybe you want to tell us what Astor is about, and what is your experience, expectation towards the let's say solar industry, but also any other industry which will help you decarbonize the social housing stock in Flanders. So over to you, Sven.
Thank you, Julien. And I already heard some very interesting things from Naomi and Thomas. Like you said in the beginning, Julien, we are not really an industry, but on the other hand, we are an industry, because from the 1st of June onwards, we will start hiring our own staff in Aster. Aster has become a separate organization organized by the Flemish social housing companies. And we did that. We worked 3 years on that with the support of the European Investment Bank. But now we are ready to go one step further. And in Flanders, which is of course not comparable with other regions in Europe, but in our social housing sector, we decided that we need a separate vehicle to organize all these PV installations. Let not deal the social housing companies with it, because it's actually, although it shouldn't be complex, it is complex. Yeah, and I will come back to that later. One of the things I already heard, and which is something I'm sometimes rather frustrated with, is that we always focus on innovation. And innovation is, of course, important, and small projects are important. But I firmly believe, when I look at Flanders, we have quite some experience with PV installations. And let's keep it simple. Yeah, keep innovating, of course, absolutely. But if you want to roll it out on a large scale, then don't do this with very innovative, complex infrastructure, but do it with something that has proven that it works. Yeah, because also when you start looking at the financing, we now last week we made an agreement with a bank, a Belgian bank, who will invest 100 million euros. Well, they will not invest it, they will lend us 100 million euros to make this work. Yeah, and of course these banks, they say, okay, all this innovation, it's very nice, but in the end we want our money back, and even a little bit more than just 100 million. Yeah, then they need a profit as well. So I think that if we want to scale this up in Europe, also in the social housing market, we should focus on what is already working, what has proven to be working. That I think that's very important. Another thing I heard was also, well, my main idea is we have to combine two things, and we should not focus only on climate change and decarbonization. We should also focus always on what's in it for our social tenants. Because Thomas, you said, I don't think the social tenants are the driving force. I'm not completely agreeing with that. They are a driving force in the sense that they notice that their energy bills are getting higher every month, and they want someone to do something about it. And then there are governments who try to, for example, in Flanders or in Belgium, they lowered the VAT on energy from 21 to 6%. And after, I think, 4 or 5 weeks, this measure was already gone. Yeah? The result was already gone, because prices were still rising much more than the VAT reduction could cope with. Yeah. So these tenants are looking for someone who can help them lower their energy bills. And I think that we as social housing companies can play a very important role in that. Yeah. Because in Flanders, at least, we don't need a profit. Yeah, we have to pay our bills, we have to pay our staff, but we don't have shareholders who at the end of the year say, okay, now we want revenue of whatever, 10, 15%. Yeah, that's a very, very comfortable situation. And I think we should exploit that, because then we can pay the costs, and all the benefits, all the financial profits can go back directly to our social tenants. So yes, I think they are an asking party as well, but we should help them. And that's a role we can play as social housing sector all over Europe, I think, because we have a lot of potential. I always, I once made a drawing, and we have a rather small housing stock in Flanders, of course, in comparison with other countries. But I made a drawing, and in this drawing, there were something like 50,000 small energy factories. Yeah. And my idea is, why don't we connect all these small energy factories? Because each factory is a dwelling. Yeah. So if we combine these, we can produce quite a lot of solar energy. Yeah. And then something you will ask, Julien, what are you expecting for tomorrow? Well, what I noticed in the last 3 years is I don't like legislation. Yeah. Absolutely not, because we found out, at least the translation of the European legislation into Flemish legislation made things so complex. Yeah, it changed every 6 months, because then politicians said, okay, we can do it this way, or perhaps we should do it that way, or oh no, we should do it in the third way. And that makes it very, very complex. So to be honest, I'm not really, we need legislation, of course, absolutely agree with that, but don't make it too difficult, because the more legislation you produce, and I'm not a liberal, but the more legislation you have, the more complex things will be. For example, we in the beginning, we very much believed in energy communities, because we can have PV installations on about 1/3 of our building stock, and we can produce enough energy to provide also the other 2/3 with solar energy. Yeah, but then the Flemish legislation has become so complex that we have to create legal entities. We have to pay for the distribution of the electricity from one dwelling to another. And right now we are in a situation that we say we are not going to deal with energy communities. In Flanders, I can't say anything about other European countries, but at this moment we say, sorry, energy communities, we will start looking for other solutions. And then I would like to come to what you said, Thomas. What we found out is we should definitely try to keep the electricity we produce in our own hands, because we made an agreement with a commercial energy company, and we use approximately, or we assume to use approximately 30% of the solar energy which is produced, and we sell 70% on the electricity market. Today, it's very profitable, of course. Yeah, it's very, yeah, it's not correct, but it is profitable at the moment. But the most interesting thing is that we can use the energy we produce on the roofs of our social dwellings for our social tenants. And then we come to heat pumps, we come to electrical cars, we come to all kinds of technologies where we can increase the self-consumption, not, for example, well, not exactly the self-consumption of each individual, but the self-consumption of the community. If we start heating water, we can use this hot water for sanitary reasons or whatever. So that's, I think, the main thing we want to do. And right now we start with the installations after summer of this year. And then first we need the panels. That's obvious. But then in the second phase, and well, it's not really a second phase, it's a bit 2 phases combined. We start looking at how can we, in the most effective way, use the energy we produce ourselves. So we want to reduce the energy we sell to a commercial energy supplier. And then we have a business model that works, a business model where we can pay back all the investments over a period of 20 years. We have made some legal construction where Aster is the owner of the installations, and after 20 years we hand it over for free to the social housing companies. And during these 20 years we do everything for them. We do the investments, we do the installations, we do the maintenance, we sell the electricity for them, for the social housing companies. We provide all the data for the billing of the social tenants. So we are an ESCO of the sector, and that will work. And will we make a profit? Well, that's very hard to say, of course. Today, yes, tomorrow, who knows? But when we make a profit, our shareholders are all and only social housing companies. There are no private companies, and I don't have a problem with private companies, to be honest. But we can keep all the profits in the sector, and then something we invented, we call it a solar bonus. If we have a profit in, let's say, 4 or 5 years time, we can use this solar bonus to give to all these or tenants who don't have a PV installation on their roofs, because then their neighbors are making a profit. We keep the profits and we hand it over to those tenants who can't have a profit because they are living in an apartment building, or because the orientation of their social dwelling is not good enough, or whatever. So that's the idea. We want to try. Well, what I would like to do is to make one renewable energy community of all social tenants in Flanders. Yeah, and then we have this legislation, and that's my my burden. The legislation doesn't allow us to do so, you know? Or they make it so complex that I have something like, keep it. Yeah, we will try to find some other ways. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Sven. I feel that both Thomas and Naomi wanted to maybe react to what has been said, or wanted to ask questions. I mean, there was a lot of interesting points made by Sven on the models, but also on the place of legislation. So maybe Naomi, you want to first maybe have a reaction?
Yeah, no, very quickly you're right on what's in for social housing. I think it's even clearer now because as I said earlier, solar PV, I should have probably insisted on this, but solar PV is really cheaper than retail prices, and we see a boom of commercial and industrial installation. So not the classic, green person that invests on the house, but really more networks of buildings or big commercial buildings that invest into solar PV because it makes sense. It's not only price, it's stability of prices. We see consumers that have long-term contracts that have been less affected by this, not affected at all even by the current energy prices. So I think it's another element to take into account. And then I just want to stress that it's also going to be the future. I mean, we're going to have systems that are a lot more electric at the house level, and to integrate all of that, we'll need local electricity generation. And I'm sure that we'll have models that develop to value that local energy generation that allows to integrate the electric vehicle, the heat pump, etc. Now, as you say, we also need to make it simple, and I think here we have a bit of a gap. We focus too much on residential self-consumption and not enough on what can a building with multi-occupancy building or a network of buildings in the neighborhood can do. And that's why I'm talking about collective self-consumption. I sense probably that the renewable energy community is not the right model, because there are a lot of safeguards, because if you do an energy community, you have the right to certain advantages. We also need a legal model, a legal vehicle for companies that do, that offer a private service in a way, and that I think should be the object of the work with the European Commission. And I think it would be also good to hear your feedback on what has worked from the energy community and what hasn't worked.
Thank you, Thomas. You wanted to maybe add or comment?
Yes, one thing that Sven said was he heard that we need too much innovation. And I think we do need innovation, but we need innovation on a process and on a policy level. I really am convinced that when it comes to decarbonization of heating and cooling, the technology is here. We can deploy zero emission, close to zero emission. I mean, don't grill me on the details in the end, but I'm very happy to defend my statement. We can pretty much decarbonize heating and cooling near to completely with existing technologies. There is going to be some technical innovation, but that's not the game changer. We do need policy innovation, and we do need process innovation. As you have said, you tried the energy communities, it is too complicated. But the principal idea, fundamental idea of an energy community, creating energy together on a roof, on several roofs, and then distributing it on the lowest possible level. I have heard from what you said that you like that idea. So I really think there is the need for innovation in making it feasible and making it easy. And legislation shouldn't be done for the sake of creating legislation. It should be done to make it easy for the end users to provide, to enjoy comfortable heating, cooling, electricity. And here we can do a lot of things. So I really think we need to talk afterwards I saw that in your background that some of the funding that you received was also from Elena. I think there's a huge opportunity in this Elena facility to help local bodies, local governments, local associations to move much faster into a decarbonized future. And again, I would say that the solutions are available. The industry is ready. What we need to look into is, do we have enough planners that can do this? And is on the other side of where the planner is, on the side of the building associations, is there enough sensitivity for the need to change fast? And again, I'm so happy to be corrected on the power of the tenants. If that's the case, I have been stating repeatedly that the tenants probably have other problems than thinking about the energy supply. But if I'm wrong, that's very good.
Well, I wouldn't say you were wrong, but I think they are a very important stakeholder, but they don't realize it all the time. Yeah, because they see their financial situation and they see a problem and they don't know how to solve it. So if we empower them as a social housing company, they are a very important stakeholder, because then and I completely agree, we don't need in the first place technological innovation, we need legal innovation. Yeah, that's absolutely what we need. And if we can have our, for example, if you have a part of your population who are all voters, and then there is some legislation and it shows that it doesn't work for these people, they go back to their politicians they are voting for, and they say, we have a problem. Because we, as social housing companies, we can go to our Minister of Living every 2 weeks, and then they say, yes, we will look into it. Yes, and then they have other things to do. Yeah, and it takes at least, well, we have some. We needed some new legislation by. Well, I first brought it to the attention of the administration and the minister in September 2020. Yeah, and it is still not there. Yeah, we are almost 2 years further and it's still not there. And that's something I don't understand. Yeah, because it's not that difficult. Yeah, but someone has to take it and do something with it. Yeah, and that's something which we should all emphasize. And that's why I always say Europe focuses on innovation. Okay, but focus on scaling up things. Yeah, because if we want to go to a better climate in 2050, which I think it's way too late, by the way, but if we want to speed up, if we want to scale up, then focus on practices that have proven their worth and implement them now and facilitate the implementation together with the industry, of course, with people who produce, companies who produce PV, heat pumps together, absolutely. But this, I think, is what Europe should make possible.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I think a lot of agreement on that. I wanted to give the opportunity to participants to raise the yellow hands to if they have questions. At the moment in the chat, I see some comments from the Netherlands. One comment from Jasper Cole saying that hybrid heat pumps will be the new standard in Netherlands from 2026 for existing buildings. Sounds like indeed something quite important for the sector, Thomas. And Robin van Leyen was saying scaling up is key. So you want to react to that?
Well, why 2026? I would ask, why wait so long? Because this technology is available today. We can do it. And Germany has a new obligation for a minimum share of renewable energy, 65% from 1st of January, and now hold your breath, 2024. So the industry has 18 months to prepare. Everybody is now very frantic about it, and it is really a challenge. But we need these type of bold statements. There are some member states that say, yeah, we'll do this by 2030. And here I'm fully in line with Sven. Why do we need to wait so long? And if you build a new building, why are you even allowed to use fossil energy in there? It is questionable because we have all the technological solutions, and that applies likewise to any type of building. Public should lead by example. It's still to my dismay that the new council building doesn't have a heat pump. It has a huge photovoltaic array everybody is proud about. But if I was advising policymakers, I would say, whenever you touch a building that you own, then why is that not renovated to the best standards? Because then you will find out if it works and if it doesn't work. And that's, again, repeating what Sven said, if you bring the people to the close to the consequences of their decision, they will understand if their own policy works. So if the policy is making it complicated to renovate a building to zero emission standards, then if you're the policymaker, you want to change that. If you're just remote from that and you still put yourself a fossil boiler in the basement, even if it's CHP, of course, you disconnect yourself a little bit from the consequences of your own policy. But leading by example is the positive message that I want to give. It's possible. It should be done every day.
Thank you. I see Robert Pinter has raised a hand for a question. So Robert, if you want just to say who you are and very briefly ask your question.
Yes, thank you very much. My name is Robert Pinter, and I'm representing the European Copper Institute. Materials needed for the energy transitions were mentioned today, among others, copper. And yes, copper is needed in heat pumps and both PV installation. And what I think is very important, the recycling of the material at the end of life. So copper industry is really ready. Scrap value chain is well established, and our common goal should be to go as close as 100% recycling and collection rate of valuable metals at the end of life. So if we collect copper from heat exchangers from heat pumps or PV panels or cables, this will result in 85% of energy reduction versus material from primary sources. And here I have one question to Naomi about the recycling of integrated PV panels. Can you tell if you know something? Because at the first look, this looks a bit more complicated to me. And my second question is about reducing the energy need. I heard a bit less about this today, but I think it's very important. For space heating, we have well-known technologies like insulating and glass replacement or window replacement. But we also have in case of hot water, the recovery of waste or heat from wastewater, for example, which means 40% of energy need reduction for hot water systems. And I think that for deployment of renewable-based system in every aspect, energy need reduction is very, very important. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Robert. And I will give the opportunity for each of the speakers to comment on what you said, because we come to the end of the first panel. So maybe Naomi and Thomas and Sven, if you want to add anything afterwards, that's fine.
Yes. So thank you for the tough question, because I can't fully reply to the recycling of integrated panels. It's a very specific field, and you have things like solar glass, solar tiles. It's not exactly the same. What I can tell you is that in general, we are really at the beginning of recycling. We're exploring different options of recycling. There are some questions on how do you design your product to make it easily dismantleable and recyclable, and at the same time not affecting the durability of the product. So there are a lot of questions and that are being discussed, and I should come back to you on this one. On reducing the energy need, I think it goes together. The model that we are defending is the model of a prosumer. So it's a consumer that has solar PV, storage, EV, and where everything is integrated and managed with automation, or with simple signals for a consumer to plan a bit when he will start, for example, his devices or charge his EVs. and this would also support reduction of energy consumption in the house. There's also another energy waste that we don't talk about, is the energy that is wasted on the grid when electricity is transported, as you perfectly know. And also here the prosumer model is a source of energy efficiency, and I think it's not enough. It's not valued enough. But maybe I think for solar PV on buildings, I think we're also entering another dimension, because solar buildings, they can, if they were equipped with solar PV, when you look at the surface available, buildings could produce 1/4 of the energy consumption of Europe. So we're going from a conversation that is purely improving the energy performance of buildings to a conversation that is, let's use as much space available to produce our energy in Europe. And that's I think another dimension where energy performance is not only the only point. Maybe just a last comment on what was discussed. Fully support what Thomas said about giving clear signals soon. Just wanted to add that it's also very important to have the skills, because if we say today to the construction industry that we install heat pumps, that we install solar PV, that is and not anymore oil and gas boiler. That is a very, very clear sign to the industries, to universities, and that's an easy solution to our problems.
Thank you, Naomi. Thomas, do you want to react?
Yeah, I think there was many things said. No, I'm okay for the moment.
Okay, and I saw that indeed you also ask questions to the participant on the chat about what is the ratio between the number of installers and what you install. That's right?
Well, I can repeat that. Indeed, I learned this morning that in the newspaper article that in Germany there are 60,000 installers. That's the part I knew, but I didn't connect it to the fact that they install 900,000 heating systems. So basically, this is very little. This is less than one every 3 weeks per company. So you ask yourself, what else are they doing? And of course, yes, they're building heating systems, they're renovating bathrooms, but we know that we have no lack of heat pump, no lack of heater installers, of boiler installers. We have a lack of heat pump installers. And if we would have to retrain them, if somebody is able to install a heating system after 3 to 4, maybe 5 days of training, they can do everything that is needed to install heat pumps. If we go even one step further, and if we would conclude that we need many more people, then the profession of a fitter, somebody then that can put the pipes to the wall, that can drill the holes, that can fix the heat pump to the wall, or the inverter for that matter. This is probably much easier to do than a full education to be a heating or electric engineer. And so from our perspective, it is really a question of announcement. If we announce this early, then we can actually do much more than we think. And one thing that I wanted to react on what Naomi said, this idea of local energy providers. If we think that we need cooling, and if you need cooling, you do it with a traditional air conditioning device. These devices produce waste heat whenever you switch them on, because a heat pump, which is the basis of them, is providing heating and cooling. And the question is, what do you need? So it's not only that we can provide electricity from the roofs of the building and from the building facades, which I fully agree to, but there is also this aspect of basically we could run cities with the energy that is available. We could have a circular energy economy in cities, from the waste heat from cooling, the waste heat from data centers, the waste heat from industrial processes, the waste heat from infrastructure, including, the colleague from Copper said it, including from wastewater. I mean, why are we allowing water to flow at temperatures of 30 degrees into the underground, where it's heating up the underground, where it will create a problem for freshwater hygienic standards, instead of saying, no, we don't allow that. We will put heat exchangers around the big wastewater pipes. We will remove the wastewater from the sewage and use it again for heating of buildings and applications. So this idea, and again, I think, Sven, then we are there. We need a change of thinking. The biggest change that we need is in our brains. And then if we start to think in the direction of a beautiful energy integrated decentral community-based, if you want, future, then we can do all this based on local energy supply.
Thank you, Thomas. And so Sven just had to leave for another meeting. I mean, so he sends the greetings and happy to be in touch for the follow-up. So I'd like to thank you, both of you, and thanks, Sven, as well, for your very good contribution for the first panel. If you want to, I mean, if you are able to stay until the end, that's very good, because there will be questions after the second panel, and I'm sure you will have the opportunity to also provide any comment. But thanks a lot, Naomi and Thomas, for your very good contribution. That's very useful, I think, in the current context. So now I'm going to the second panel, and where we're going to have the perspective of the social housing providers a bit more, and for that we have two speakers. First of all, Quentin Lamour is a EU project manager at Velogia. Velogia is one of the biggest social housing providers in France. And then Robin van Leyen from ADIS, the Dutch Social Housing Federation, that will tell us about the lessons from a gas-free social housing sector, or at least from the journey towards gas-free social housing in the Netherlands. So yeah, maybe now I'll give the floor to Quentin, if you are with us. I saw you were on the list.
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah, super, Quentin. Bonjour, hello.
Bonjour.
And so over to you for your presentation.
Yeah, I have some slides to share. So I think you can see it now.
Yes.
And now here
Perfect.
it is.
Yeah.
So yeah, first of all, thank you, Julien, and thank you, Housing Europe, for organizing this event and to invite us to share our experience on these questions of decarbonization and gas-free social housing. So I will first present a bit Velogia and have an overview. So as you said, Velogia is the third largest private social housing company in France. We pursue a mission of social utility. So we have three business lines. We are a social landlord, but we are also a real estate developer and an urban developer. And this is important. I will explain a bit later why. We have an activity at national scale. We are historically based in Lille, in the Lille European metropolis, but we are also now developing our activity in all the big cities in France, and in Paris, Nantes, Bordeaux, and so on. Some figures just for you to have an idea of the potential of Velogia to decarbonize our stock. So we have 77,000 dwellings around. So it's around 160,000 people housed. And in 2021, we renovated around 2,000 housing units, and there's almost the same amount delivered of new homes. And we also have urban projects, and we have 11 development projects, urban development projects. So this is just to have an overview on Velogia. And now I will share some figures on the energy mix of the company and of the energy mix for heating and hot water, domestic hot water. First, good news, we don't have oil systems anymore. So this is good news, but it's quite new actually. So just for you to know how long it is to change an energy mix. But as we see here, gas still represents 70% of our stock. So the renovation of our building stock is a way of changing the energy vector. We also installed some district heating. As you can see here, we have like 11 heating systems. I will show you in the table here, so it will be easier. This is only for the part on renewable energy in the mix. So we have heat pumps, PV installed, thermic solar panels, heat recovery, and renewable district heatings. So as you can see, heat pumps only represent 1% of our stock. PV was 0.7, thermic solar panels a bit more, heat recovery on water and air only 0.5%, and we have 11% of our stock linked to a renewable district heating grid. Now, as we said this, which strategy do we have to implement on our building stock to decarbonize it? So we just started a mission with Carbon 4 and Puget Consultant. So Carbon 4 is a Jean-Marc Jancovici consulting company, and they are assisting us to defining the optimal energy mix. So to define some scenarios based on environmental criteria as CO2, for example, but also on finance aspects, technical feasibility, and organizational, because it's important to see how we organize the company to have this change in the mix. So they will also help us to define a method to implement this proposed mix, and to have some tools to help us in the decision. So these first scenarios should be available from June on. So yeah, it's a really new mission, and we expect a lot of it. And this will help us to define our strategy for the company for 2002 to 2005, and also, of course, further towards 2030, 2040, 50, to have this decarbonization in mind and all the steps to achieve it. So we will have, of course, insights on how to organize our new constructions, all the refurbishments, and how to manage our building stock, and all the maintenance and contracts to achieve this goal. And we also had many experimentation on these topics. So the first of all, and it was, I think, the basis of all these reflections on decarbonization and all the changes in our organization, it is the energy strong concept. So maybe for those who don't know the concept, the idea is to refurbish a house with off-site facade and roof elements, and the idea is to reach a passive building, so E = 0, and this warranty with a warranty of 25 years. And the refurbishment also happen while the dwellings are occupied, so it has to be very fast, and this method is quite has a lot of advantages for this. And we install heat pumps and dual flow ventilation for heating, And also we balance the consumption through the installation of PV. The main objective of this method is to massificate, to scale up the renovation. So we had the first project in Hem, near Lille, in 2019. We handed over 10 single-family homes, and we also have, we also have another project. So the first project was a European project called E=0. Now we have a second European project on this topic, which is called Must Be Zero. And this project is to adapt the Energy Sprong method to the multifamily buildings. So we have a 32 dwelling project. This is the first Energy Sprong multi-story project for Villogia. So you have here some images. If you have interest, I can explain a bit more on the technical concept behind this, but I think I will go through, and if you are interested, you ask me later. And the idea, as I was saying, the idea of Energy Sprong is to massificate the renovation. So in our stock at Villogia, we have 11,500 EFG labeled dwellings. So the less efficient dwellings we have. From those, 8,000 are of priority, and we already planned 500 dwellings to be already handed over or planned until 2025. We have 4,200 easy to refurbish and 3,000 that are feasible but a bit more complicated. So this is a big potential for massification of the renovation and also of the installation of renewable energy systems. And this can be an opportunity for RepowerEU. We also had experimentations on PV installations further than the Energy Sprong projects. So we had this project, also a European project, which was called PV Sites, and we installed BIPV, so building integrated PV, on the wall of the building. So we seized the opportunity of a deep renovation to install these panels. The idea was to have a collective self-consumption on the 4 common area meters, including the lifts, and we were selling the surplus. So this was a project on this topic, and from this and from all these experimentations, we learned a lot, of course, and I wanted to share with you some of these learnings. So the business model of Energy Sprong coming from Holland, was from the Netherlands, was to have a flat rate package, which was where you have the rent and utilities included. So for the social housing company, it's interesting because you can finance a little bit of the investment through this flat rate package that doesn't change for the tenant, but of course with the renovation the utilities drop and the rent is a bit higher. So for social housing companies, a bit you have a return on investment and you can finance this type of renovations. The problem is that in France we don't have the possibility to do this. So the opportunity of having a photovoltaic on energy strong projects is a bit it's a bit complicated. The idea then was to sell the energy produced. The problem is that to reinforce the existing networks, for re-injection, it has a cost which is quite high per dwelling, so it's also a drawback. The DSO NADs is always late in projects, so normally projects are handed over and the DSO is ready 1 year later. So it's also problematic, and the selling price is decreasing. So also the business model is not so easy to equilibrate. An alternative to selling is to self-consume the energy. For us, it's quite new. It's a new subject for Velogia. It's quite complex to implement. A lot of reasons, as I wrote here on the right, we lack of internal expertise. We also lack of external expertise, but internally in Velogia, it's complicated. We also have problem of managing this question of PV. So we have no maintenance contracts. As the volumes are really low, it's complicated to have good prices on the maintenance, and the costs are really high versus the return on investment we have through selling. So it's also an issue in organizing internally at Velogia, organizing the utilities recovery charge. Yeah, we have to organize this, and we have no piloting tool in the company. So for now, implementing PV it's not easy. On self-consumption, a possibility was to self-consume with the tenants, but also it's another layer of complexity. This leads to some issues. There is no return on investment for Velogia because the gain is for the tenant. It might be justified by our social utility, of course, but the finance issue, actually finance is an issue, so maybe we might have some subventions or some aids from the states, but we don't have them. So yeah, self-consumption is complicated. It's not easy to implement because of many reasons, both internal organization and also external expertise on maintenance, on conception, and design, and so on. We have also a question regarding the carbon footprint of the PV panels. PV normally, a lot of times are produced in China or in Asia, so the carbon footprint is quite high. And this is a message to the industry and to Europe, but we would need a low carbon production, maybe located in France or in the neighbor countries. So these are the learnings for photovoltaic, and in the energy strong projects, we discontinued the installation of PV panels in the future projects because of all these reasons. Now I wanted to share with you some learnings on heat pumps. So heat pumps are very efficient for collective systems. It's easy to install when you already have a gas boiler, a collective gas boiler, for example. But it has to be associated to a deep renovation in order to have a better efficiency of the building and especially of the building envelope. As Thomas was saying, we lack installers that are really well formed. So we lack of expertise from the installers. This is a fact. And regarding maintenance, the question is also of the expertise of the maintainers. Normally they have really, sometimes have low technical expertise. The costs are almost the same as the gas, so it's not a problem. And also the lifespan of the heat pumps are a bit shorter than gas boilers, so we have to replace it more times on the long run. So it has to be integrated also in the cost. It has some noise pollution when it's really close to a single family house. In multi-family houses, it's not multi-family buildings. Sorry, it's not so problematic because it's really close. It's in the basement, for example, but close to houses, it might be a problem. And also the heat island effect when you have a lot of heat pumps in the same area, so it might have consequences on this question of heat island. We are installing and we will install more heat pumps in our stock, building stock, and the share will grow in the energy mix. But we have to be careful because the electricity needs will dramatically raise in the coming years from the reduction of gas share, but from the installation of e-vehicles, of all the e-technologies. So maybe just to not think only on the electricity vector, but maybe to have a more equilibrated, balanced energy mix. This is a reflection we have today. So I wanted to share this reflection also with you, because to have a lot of the share of electricity will be too much, and we will have to produce even more and even more. And this is this might be problematic on the long run and on the larger scale. So this is a reflection. And I think, we think that district heating are really interesting and important for us. So we developed this system in the past years, and we will continue developing it. We have 24 district heating systems. It's 11% of our stock. We own directly 2 districts, one of biomass and one of gas. And this is one remark I wanted to do. District heating are interesting, but you have to be careful of the power source you are using, because if you use gas, it's not so virtuous as biomass or I don't know, another renewable source than for district heating. So for us, the potential is really high for massification. It's easy to change if the power source turns non-viable, as we saw with gas, for example. You can change, and a lot of dwellings will have, in consequence, another source of energy. Actually, other potential users are not residential buildings, and this is really interesting to balance the consumption during the day and during night. So this is interesting for us. You can co-finance it with other stakeholders, so share the costs. And we are also, as I was saying, we have this activity of urban development. So the scale of the district is really interesting for us, and we can develop such systems at this urban scale, at the district scale. And we have the expertise inside at Velogia. So here is you can see two photos of one of the districts we co-own actually here in Lambersart near Lille. It's a biomass. So we want to develop this solution as often as possible because it's really virtuous for us. And this has a potential of massification for renewable energy systems. So this is also interesting for to have this implementation of a policy for RepowerEU. Just as a conclusion, we see two ways for the massification of renewable energy in the social housing sector, through the industrialization and massification of renovations, through mainly energy strong concept. So working on the envelope and installing heat pumps and dual flow ventilation. As I said, PV installation is more complex, but discontinued it on our future projects. Will discontinue actually. And the other way is to promote district heating, and if possible, with institutional or tertiary stakeholders. But these strategies are medium to long-term strategies. And as I saw, RepowerEU wanted to act quite fast and act on the short and medium-term needs. So I don't know if these strategies are compatible with these short and medium terms. So yeah, for the housing sector, the time scale is quite long actually. As you saw, we just left the oil boilers this year, so it takes a long. Some proposition of actions at the EU level, maybe supporting this flat rate package, rent plus utility for new tenancy contracts. This might be interesting for us. To see the social landlord as an energy provider, as Sven was saying, legal barriers sometimes can be counterproductive. So we could be seen as an energy provider. We can't today because of the law. We could also have energy communities driven by social housing companies, and also support research and innovation on smart heat networks and storage, and continue, as I was saying, redevelop a production of PV in Europe to have a low carbon PV. And for Velogia, we also want to continue on experimenting and having these demonstrators on zero energy districts, energy community, heat storage, and many other topics linked to these issues. And of course, we are always wanting to be part of EU projects. So if you are, or if you know, so if you are part of a EU project in construction, or yeah, please contact us, and we would be very happy to be part of new projects. So here you have my email. If you have questions a bit later, might be interesting. And thank you for.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Quentin. Yeah, plenty of things in your presentation. I would like people to hold the questions for a moment, because I'd like to give the floor to Carlis Goldstein from the cabinet of Commissioner Simpson. Indeed, Carlis has to leave quite soon, so we wanted to give him the opportunity to react already to what has been said. And so we will conclude after Carlis with Robin from the Netherlands and Sorka. But Maybe Carlis, if you want to jump in now for your reaction and feedback to what has been said this morning, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Julian, for the moderation, and sorry to jump the queue a little bit. You can imagine we are running quite busy times at the moment with all of the preparation for the RepowerEU. So my sincere apologies. But I think it's been a very good and useful event for me so far, because we often speak to the sector, but what is crucial now is really the implementation and making the change on the ground. And this discussion that we had really slots super well into that discussion or into that picture. So maybe I can give you a quick rundown of what to expect and what I noted. So I'll start with what I noted. It seems that the work that we're doing for the industry clusters and facilitating exchange is quite good. Maybe for the future, it would be useful if more ideas come in where you, for example, Housing Europe, but also the industry, see that bridges need to be built. The question there is at what appropriate level? Should it be European level bridge building? Should it be local municipal level, or something still yet different? But it would be good to know, because the European Union, as the word says, union, it's quite difficult to avoid the fact that we are all about, bringing people together, right? So this applies to the IPCIs. It applies to making sure there are possibly joint procurements for materials, components. It's about financing as well. Bringing together stakeholders, because the European budget is pretty much agreed. I mean, it is agreed and pretty much limited, I would rather say. But if we need additional funding or new schemes, then we can help, let's say, agree or barter those. Then about the legislation, EU is quite experienced at doing that. And I enjoyed very much the back and forth about what's the role. I'd say that as the current situation really accelerates the speed of the transition, then we are more and more in a situation where the European Union gives guidance and the headline targets, and then within that sort of box or framework, there are certain, let's say, deals or liberties that then the people on the ground actually need to make use of. So, for example, thinking about the different technologies that need to be deployed. We've spoken about heat pumps and solar PV. There are other options out there as well. Haven't mentioned storage beyond batteries or electric vehicles today. But the point there is that it's really about the system efficiencies. And if we look at the transition that the social buildings and housing can bring, the scale is enormous. I mean, we already know that buildings consume close to half of EU's energy. If we now put social housing to the positive side, and thanks to you, we are really seeing that is a very serious and quickly moving area, then we can decarbonize and reduce our dependency on fossil fuel imports significantly. The question, which I know is important for all of you, is the affordability and making sure that it is just and fair. So the idea of energy communities that was mentioned a couple of times hasn't moved forward as quickly as we may have wanted. And these are also questions of national implementation. But as it was said, we shouldn't bin the idea completely. It's rather than we need to really make it work, because it's quite essential that prosumers do have a business case. They can support the energy system and their, let's say, nearby neighborhoods.
And the idea there is to think about aligning the production and consumption of energy, so it's consumed at the same time, at the same spot as it's being produced, and then to broaden the horizon, so to say. So if I don't need the energy, maybe my neighbor would, because that would reduce the stress on distribution grids, transmission grids, and the generation capacities that need to be held online. Especially big thermal power plants, even if they sell electricity for just a couple of hours per day, they can't be ramped up or shut down very easily, so they need to keep on running throughout the day. Maybe now zooming into what's there to come, I thought that I'd dedicate a couple of words on RepowerEU, coming out soon, if you agree. So the general direction is pretty clear from the beginning of March, where the plan was announced. But just to reiterate, it's really about the actions that can be put in place in the immediate term and in the short term. So it's about filling up EU's gas stocks for next winter, because we won't be able to phase out all of the consumption overnight. Then making sure that wherever we source that energy, it's independent from Russia sources, so not just gas, but also oil, and to diversify our supplies. This is a longer standing process, of course, which will continue until full independence or decarbonization, whichever comes first. Then there's the element of infrastructure and infrastructure bottlenecks, which need to be addressed, just to make sure that in case of sudden cuts of supply from, let's say, traditional or more used to sources, we still have a backup. And then fourth, which is, I think, the biggest political and also in terms of task challenge, it's accelerating the European Green Deal. So looking at the headline targets, but also proposing how the co-legislators could strengthen the Fit for 55 proposals that are already out there and on their way to being finalized. So on top of that, there's the layer of immediate savings that can be done in buildings, transport and industry to cut the energy demand by roughly 5 to 10%. Why I give such big margins is because a lot of it is behavioral, and it depends on to what extent people stick to it. You have heard possibly about reducing your indoor temperature by 1 degree, turning down the thermostat, or driving less. Well, these are just examples. But as the summer comes, it might shift more towards transport with vacations to make people more aware. But then as the heating season starts in autumn, we need to be more mindful again about the heating use. And of course, RepowerEU is about deployment of renewable and efficient solutions, the technologies that were already mentioned. So heat pumps, solar panels, but also the wider framework of shortening permitting deadlines. And a couple of points that were mentioned today, which I think are really important, is making sure, and that the sector can do, is to make sure that there are long-term contracts for raw materials and components for affordable prices. And this is where the public sector and big, let's say, companies, also housing companies can help, is the aggregated demand. So you don't buy insulation at 100% retail price. You might get a reasonable discount if you do bulk procurements, a little bit like the energy sprung that was mentioned earlier. So making sure that the materials are there, because we receive already signals that in some cases the prices have gone up, and you've spoken about this. So they're not that readily available. It's, let's say, mutual dynamics there between the price and availability, that's for sure. And then skilled professionals, It depends slightly on the sector to what extent they are actually a problem. But it's to reflect at many levels, including at the industry level, including at the municipal and national levels. What can we actually do to make sure that the necessary people are available in the different industries? And it's not a very straightforward answer, because the competences are going to be slightly different depending on what technologies you want to roll out. And finally, I agree with what has been said on the innovative financing schemes, for example, on-bill payments. That is really, really valuable, but it has to be rolled out again in collaboration between the utilities with the housing providers or companies or building owners. And there should be a role for the municipalities to chip in. And that's where we need also motivated administrators. So if you have a good, let's say, solutions how to make sure that there's enough technical assistance, we hope that you pass on the message as well in your contacts. Just to make sure indeed that we have project pipelines and that there's a strategic vision behind decarbonization as such, because housing is connected to mobility inevitably, and all of this is connected to people's health, productivity, etc. So I will wrap up here. I'm really glad to be part of the discussion, and also following our exchanges. If you wish, please do reach out and share your ideas where you think Europe could act, especially, particularly in the short term, and think about it also introspectively. What is it that are the large energy consumers in terms of cost, but also because cost and affordability is one angle, but also in terms of actual kilowatt hours consumed, and what can be done strategically to help, let's say, alleviate that issue, because inevitably summer will pass and then we'll head into winter again. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Carlis, for taking your time in a very busy schedule, as we all imagine. And thank you as well for the invitation to continue the conversation. So if people have a relevant information or ideas, I think Carlis will be happy to receive them. So thanks a lot, and we free you for your next duty. So thank you for your time. I'd like to I'd like to go back to the order of speakers and apologize to Robin, who now will have the duty to almost conclude the round of presentations. And after Robin's presentation, we'll take a bit of time to look at the questions that's been asked, also to Quentin's presentation. So Robin, over to you if you wish. But we can't hear you so far, if you were speaking.
Yeah. Okay. Do you see my screen? Can you confirm that, Julian?
Yes, just not on the full screen mode, so you can.
Okay, I will put it on full screen mode then. Carlis, if you have just 1 second, because I had one specific question addressed to you by the end of my presentation. So I'll bring it to the beginning of the presentation, and hopefully
sure,
if you have time, you can still quickly answer it. From what I understand, that the massive uptake of solar panels is part of the RepowerEU communication or action plan, which is of course good. And my question is that really compatible with the way that the EPBD4 is now designed? To illustrate, EPBD4 introduces MAPs, minimal energy performance standards, to reach a certain EPC class for a building, which we support, by the way. However, what we see now in the Netherlands, when we determine the EPC class, we basically deduct the energy generated on site from the primary fossil energy use. So the positive effect of solar panels is taken into consideration when you determine the EPC class of a building. The EPBD4 changes the EPC from primary fossil energy use to primary energy use. So basically, it seems to imply that introducing or integrating the positive effect of solar panels is not included anymore when you determine the EPC class of a building. And this could be, well, a bottleneck, because as a building owner, you tend to take the measures that will help you comply with the regulation that is set. And if including solar panels is not one of them, how is that compatible with the plan to create a massive uptake of solar panels by RepowerEU? Long question, my apologies.
Long question and possibly short answer, because I'll have to run. But what I can say is that the need for the shift was brought upon by the political decision that we should focus on energy consumption. So the shift went from speaking about on-site generation versus off-site generation or fossil fuel generation, which sort of in the provisions, to renewable generation, to the actual envelope and the building consumption as such, and building energy management. So that is, let's say, the logic or the rationale behind that change. But of course, I see that see your point, and I take it that that changes a little bit the landscape. So point taken, and thanks for raising it.
Well, thank you for allowing me the time to ask the question, and I will jump into my presentation now.
Thank you. I'll say goodbye.
Thank you. First, allow me to introduce myself. My name is Robin van Leijen. I work for ADES, which is the Dutch Association of Social Housing Providers. We represent around 96% of all social housing providers from the Netherlands, and our members run around 1/3 of the total Dutch housing stock. So it's quite a big sector, actually. Thank you also to Housing Europe for having me here today to speak about RepowerEU in a very timely way, because as we know, the action plan will be launched tomorrow and aims at reducing the dependency of Russian gas. Interestingly enough, that's also the ambition for the Netherlands since 2019. Actually, then also partly for other reasons, the government decided to have an entire gas-free building stock by 2050. So you could say that we are 3 years on our way to such a gas-free built environment. And today I would like to present 7 of the lessons that we learned on this process. First, some context about heating in the Netherlands. Before 2019, and even still a little bit today, I could say that heating by natural gas is and was the default option in the Netherlands. The Netherlands always had access to gas in the North Sea, which made it a relatively cheap option. However, the extraction of gas led to earthquakes in the north of the country, and together with the climate ambitions of the government, having a natural gas-free environment by 2050 was included in the Dutch Climate Agreement of 2019. A few words about that Dutch Climate Agreement. That is basically a covenant that was signed between the government and stakeholders across all industries. So also agriculture, industry, housing, mobility, everything. And it includes a separate agreement for the built environment. In the picture on the right side of the sheet, you can see the total overview in English of all the measures taken for the built environment. The most important thing to focus on here today is, well, getting natural gas free. And we plan to do that through district heating, either at low, middle, or high temperature, hybrid heat pumps, and all electric heat pumps. It's important to stress that municipalities are in the driving seats here. Basically, the idea is that each municipality will make a transition vision for heating within their own city. And there they will designate which district in that city will be removed of natural gas, at what point in time, and what renewable alternative will come in place. Since the social housing sector is that large in the Netherlands, it was decided to use the social housing sector as a starting engine for that. So, as mentioned, municipalities draft transition visions. I read the transition vision of my own city, and you really see, okay, these districts we will connect to district heating, these districts we will connect to hybrid heat pumps, and these districts we will connect to all electric heat pumps. Then it's basically the challenge for the social housing provider to make sure that you insulate to a temperature level that's adequate for the renewable heating in that district. For example, all electric heat pumps or low temperature district heating requires better insulation than hybrid heat pumps and high temperature and mid temperature district heating. So put differently, we're looking for a match here. You can see that visualized in the picture in my presentation, which is in Dutch, but I'll walk you through it. On the left side, you see the perspective of the social housing provider. He has a portfolio strategy, and that translates to an ambition level of insulation for each and every building within its portfolio. On the other side, you see the perspective of the municipality. They draft a transition vision, and which basically means that for every district in that city, you will decide what heating source will be the future. And the two, they meet in the middle, basically, because there you see in Dutch temperature level, which means that you basically just have to make sure that the level of insulation is sufficient for the renewable heating source that you choose. This sounds very simple, but it is not, because important coordinating questions remain. As mentioned before, all electric heat pumps require quite high level of insulation, and well, simply said, this is not something that you do overnight. It just takes time. We have an expression in the Netherlands called VNEX districts. Basically, these are districts built in the early 90s. And usually, these are very well insulated homes. So if you're looking for the mass of the uptake of all electric heat pumps, this would be a good place to start. However, these districts generally house very well-off middle-income households, and they do not typically house the most vulnerable people. So that leads to the question, where to focus on. Do you go for insulating homes of vulnerable people, or do you want to have a rapid uptake of heat pumps? How do you do that? Of course, there's also a financial side to this issue. You see that solar panels are very cost-effective, actually. Hybrid heat pumps, largely cost-effective. But district heating and all-electric heat pumps, well, they require major investments that are still, well, largely financially unviable. Unlike my colleague from France, we actually see that these renewable installations have higher maintenance costs. And we also see that the depreciation period of these costs are shorter. So that really does something to your cash flow as a building owner. As mentioned before, we decided to use the social housing sector as a starting engine for this transition in the Netherlands. Basically, the idea is, okay, it's such a large stock, 30% of the total Dutch builder stock. If we bundle those volumes together, that will help industrialize the process and bring prices down. Well, we're 3 years on our way. It hasn't really done that so far. To put frankly, we're still waiting patiently. Another way to say it, there's an event about building renovation almost every day now in the EU bubble. And during every event, we hear, well, the industry is ready, the solutions are there. My request would be, well, don't just say it, show us. So please increase production, industrialize the process, and make sure that cost-effective solutions will become available to a sector where affordability is and will continue to be key. Well, enough about money. As promised, we had 7 lessons learned after 3 years, and I will walk you through them. And the first lesson that we learned is that social support is a crucial element, but also often missing. So this is really a social transition. If you install a heat pump, you literally intervene behind the front door of somebody's home. In the Netherlands, it's required that if you renovate a multi-apartment building, 70% of all tenants would need to agree to that renovation before works can start. And from our members, we heard it's just often really complicated to get the 70% approval rate. Even in situations where we were to finance the full renovation ourselves, and we even buy a new cooking set, because if you change to electronic heating, you also have electronic cooking, and you need a new cooking set, and that costs money. Even in those situations, sometimes tenants refuse to give their approval because it's a change and it's not known for them. So this social part is crucial. Second, and I think this has been mentioned a couple of times here today, upskilling and reskilling of workers is crucial. We lack sufficient installers for heat pumps, and we really need that. And this is something that's really true for the whole renovation wave, actually. If I take that point a little bit wider, I could say capacity issues are there everywhere. They're there with the municipalities that need to make the transition efficient. They're there with the installers. They're there with the producers. Already mentioned here a couple of times today, sometimes their heat pumps are just out of stock. They're there with the net operators, and they're also there with the social housing providers. It really requires something from everybody involved. Fourth point is collectivity is needed. Obviously for district heating, but also for other solutions, even for heat pumps. To give you an example, what happens if you have a district where everybody decides to go for a heat pump, but one resident? Do you keep the entire gas infrastructure intact for just that one person? And who's going to pay for that? Complex questions. Fifth point, we also see that increased electrification of the built environment leads to pressure on the grid. We're cooking electronically, we're heating electronically, we're driving electronically, we're charging our cars electronically, and this does something. Another news article that we saw today, I saw in the chat some comments about hybrid heat pumps compulsory since 2026, which is good news, of course. But another news article today showed that we had massive shutdowns of solar panels because there was so much energy generated by solar panels on a day that the grid couldn't take it anymore, and all solar panels shut down. So these are challenges. The sixth challenge, what we see is that district heating often can be a very cost-effective solution, especially in urban areas, especially in densely populated urban areas. But here, the legislation is a challenge. My colleague Sven said a little bit jokingly, I do not like legislation. Well, I'm a public affairs professional. I love legislation because without legislation, I would not have a job. But I do see that by introducing legislation too detailedly, it can become a bit of a disrupting force. What we see now is that legislation is very much focused on the building level and not on the district level. And if you move to district heating, what you need all participants or all residents in a district to participate. If you do not have sufficient residents participating, you do not have a closing business case for district heating. And we call that the loading risk of district heating. And if the regulation is then on the building level rather than the district level, this can become complicated. An example is the RED 2 that requires governments to set individual demands for the amount of renewable heating after a major renovation. Well, after a major renovation means that you do something after an individual building has been touched. But what happens if you plan to move the entire district to a more collective solution a few years later? You have some coordination issues there. My final issue is basically the conclusion of all the 6 issues I mentioned before. This is just not a quick fix. It's not an easy solution. It's very important. I do not want to jeopardize that, but also for the climate and also for the geopolitical solutions. But getting rid of gas, getting rid of fossil fuels is not something that you do overnight. It's a long process. It's a slow process, and it just takes time. And those are my final words, and I'm happy to answer any questions if they're there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Robin. Indeed, a lot of points on which I'm sure everyone would have an opinion, but we'd like to respect the time as well. There was already questions asked to Quentin a bit earlier, so I'd like to pick some of the questions that both of you could comment on, because there was a question about the factors that you need to take into account when you choose to one specific heating systems. Well, in the case of the Netherlands, I understand that the legislation banning gas boilers is a powerful factor, but what are other factors that you have to take into account, and in particular looking at the cost for tenants and the energy bills, the expectations on energy bills, which was also one of the sub questions. So I don't know if Quentin, you want to say a word about that?
Yeah, actually, the question is the availability of the district heating, because normally district heatings are produced or are developed by the city council or even the metropolitan area, as in Lille. So if there is a grid located really close to the project, we might have this investment to connect to the grid. But if it's too long, too far away, we can't invest. It's too heavy, and it would be financially not feasible. So I think this is the main factor. And then, yeah, we can install heat pumps if we don't have the access to a grid, like a common grid.
Okay, thank you. And Robin, probably same, I would say. No?
Yeah, I would largely agree to that. Yeah.
Yeah, indeed, the availability, the proximity of the grid, and indeed heat pumps being a solution when actually there's no grid available. Although we've heard that indeed the heat pumps are also very useful in the case of district heating, can be used in that case. So there was a question by Thomas to you, Robin, about the cost, and he was asking basically the question of the cost of carbon when you do the calculation about cost, whether you manage to include a shadow price for carbon, knowing that European Heat Pump Association show that doing this brings the cost of fossil and renewable at the same level. So yeah, just a question which a lot of questions are asking in those days, obviously.
Yeah, of course. And I think it's a correct question to ask. To be honest, no, we do not. And I think what you see here is a different perspective from the macro level as the micro level. At the macro level, I fully understand Thomas's point, and you should look at the cost of carbon. At the micro level, and with that I mean one of my members that needs to house the most vulnerable people at a cost-effective price, at a capped price, this is another issue. We are a non-profit industry. So we do not have profits that we can use to invest in technologies that are not cost-effective. We cannot increase the rents because we house those with the lowest incomes, and rents are capped. So for us, and cost analysis is just what it is. It's just what we can afford. And we're starting to learn to accept that sometimes we would lose money, and pretty much all the times we would lose money to renovate homes. But we still need to make sure that we can still continue our key task, which is housing people on a low income.
Thank you, Robin. And indeed, it's a complicated point, indeed, how you value, how you monetize the multiple benefits and carbon. And indeed, it would lead us to the question also linked to the ETS2. No time for that now because we need to wrap up. And I really thank everybody, including Robin and Quentin, for the second panel. I think it's a very interesting discussion, and I invite everybody to try to contact each other and follow up on that conversation because I think it is worth really going into the details of some of the points we made today. Now it's time for wrapping up, for concluding. Soka, it was Secretary General of Housing Europe. We'll say a few words to conclude the session. Soka, over to you.
Yes, thanks a lot, Julien. Just 2 minutes from my side. I think you've already, let's say, given the trigger for the next key discussion that we will need to bring people together for. So on the impact of ETS, it's another one that's really a hot issue for our sector at the moment. So I think what has really become clear is that this is really a wicked problem. So Ben started off the session with the urgent, let's say, inflation that is impacting particularly the most vulnerable in Europe. So we are looking at some of the highest rates of inflation ever, an average of 7.8% this month, and most of that being attributed to energy. So what it means is people living in inefficient homes who are relying on oil-dependent transport, who potentially have mouths to feed, because obviously the price of food has also gone up, are really in an urgent situation, and there is no sign of this letting up. So I think the urgency was really brought home by Bent to kick off this session. And we also heard from Carlos, who is obviously in the middle of these very tough negotiations, looking at a situation where Europe might not have enough energy by next winter. So they're looking at what type of very short-term solutions we can put in place to stock gas, to find new connections. So we are looking at really a wicked problem that has to be treated both in the midterm, the short term, the long term. And I think what became very clear today is that we have to break down the barriers between industry, between those actors working on the ground, to identify what are the barriers, what are those factors that are really slowing down change, and what is the role of the EU there, and what is the role of national level. And I think we went some degree in identifying some of those today, but we have to do this more quickly if we really want to make progress. What also was very clear is that industry has a key role to play, but we also really saw the added value of social housing providers in this. So they, as Sven pointed out, and as Vilogia pointed out, and we heard from Robin as well. So they have a double mission. So, and that mission to make sure that most vulnerable in society are catered for and are part of this energy transition means that they can really put a model in place for a fair energy transition. And actually, this is why the sector has come together in a project called ReShapeEU, because we see that there are really examples within the social housing sector that show the way for an inclusive, district-led, fair energy transition that can serve as a model for the rest of the built environment, but also for other sectors. And what this is going to take is increased collaboration between cities, between local authorities, between the construction sector and industry. But Carlos talked about the need for this integrated approach to the energy transition that has to look at mobility, has to look at inclusion, has to look at also aging. And this is exactly what we're doing in ShapeEU. And what we see is we have a lot to show from the sector, but there are a lot of gaps when we look at the map of Europe. So we heard from Vilogia, from a region where you have 20% social housing. We heard from the Netherlands, also 30% social housing. So you have a lot of learning there. But what we want to do in ShapeEU is make sure that that learning is put at the disposal of those regions and cities who have not yet have that governance in place, who don't yet have that potential. And I think we have a lot of work to do, but today's session helped us a little bit along that path, and we look forward to working together to reach these objectives. So thank you very much. Thanks, Julien, as well.
Thank you everyone, and the recording will be sent to you by email.